Yeshua, your King of praise. Shalom, everyone. This is Messianic Rabbi Buzz Tremé, the Jew teaching you. Welcome to our Bible study. Yeshua, you are the way. Yeshua.
A lady got mad at me in traffic the other day. Very awkward. She almost caused a wreck. Whipped around in front of me and made a turn in the way I was turning, and got out of her car, came up to my truck and opened the door. Now, you just don't experience these things without a flash of adrenaline. The fight or flight thing, which God put in us, kicks in. And it's like, what do I do here? Last thing I want to do is hit somebody, especially a female. So that part of me is going, no, 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 no. That's only in, defense if you have to. But all of this has happened quickly. But instantly, the Spirit of God is in me trying to help me through this. And He's showing me that you don't have the right to be right here. You have the right to be righteous. The reason this woman's out of control, something's wrong in her life. Think about it. You've had things wrong in your life. She's got problems. You got problems. Everybody's got problems. But don't condemn her. And all I could say to her was, you need to back off. Get away from my truck. You've got traffic stopped in the intersection. A little short woman. It's hard to tell how old they are anymore because I want to say an old lady, but she's probably younger than I am. But anyway, it was awkward. And so Lorraine hollers, "We're sorry!" And the lady went, like I wasn't expecting a kind. Paul says in 1 Corinthians, I believe it is, 3 or so, take the hit if you have to. Live at peace with all men wherever it's possible on your part. Why not rather be wronged than to get your way? I'm right. We lose the right to be right. We only have the right to be righteous. So I'm thinking, what would Yeshua do here? He would look to her beyond the surface, look into her life, and see that there were some problems. And so I quickly said, "I'm sorry." And Lorraine was hollering, we're sorry, we're sorry. She says, "You almost made me have a wreck." I'm thinking, my God, you just almost hit me. And anyway, she was having a bad day and I became the thing. But I said, "I'm so sorry, I'm sorry." And she didn't know what to do with that. And she said, "Well, okay." And just went and got in her car, Well, we had business to tend to. It didn't leave me. I was so troubled about this. And so we shared it with some people, because it was fresh. And I actually looked around if I could find the woman. I wanted to go talk to her and, and tell her, "Hey, look, you can blame me all you want for your bad day, but let me help you make your day better." That's what we're about. What is it that makes me act that way? Because I'm just a doggone nice guy. Buzz is just this great guy. I have my own boundaries where sometimes there's a little Hulk in all of us, Anyway, but I try, and I really want God's Spirit to help me through all this. Don't you? Yeah. Isn't it good? Yeah. I mean, and I just get this ministry from the Holy Spirit saying, as you go back over the events and how you could have handled it maybe and what, and it just works out where the Lord's saying, always do what I would do. And it's okay to be wrong. Being right is nothing. I'm the one that determines who's right and wrong. Take the hit. if you have to. Isn't that cool? Anyway, so we're talking about God. So he chooses Abraham. First he destroys humanity because the angels and the people are, a lot of bad stuff going on in the world at that time. So God chooses Abraham and says, I'm going to build a people of faith. And from the people of faith come the nation of Israel. The covenant made with Noah was to all nations. So all people groups are under the Noahic covenant. But now God calls Abraham and puts a new set of covenants just for Abraham and his offspring. So Abraham receives the Abrahamic covenant. Then later his descendants with Moses receive a covenant at Mount Sinai. And then when they get ready to go in the promised land, 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, they get to the promised land and they're about to go in, and God says, I now, Deuteronomy 26:11 is it? I now establish a new covenant with you. He says, like the one I gave you at Sinai, but this is another covenant. Very often people miss that. So a covenant concerning the land was given to the people. This covenant, the Mosaic covenant, had to do with Israel and their relationship to God and to their fellow man. The first 4 commandments of the 10 had to do with man's responsibility or relationship with God. When you get to the next 6 commandments, they're all about man's relationship with man. That's what this covenant does. Okay, we move from that one to the Promised Land covenant. Now it's about man's responsibility and obligation to the land. And the big thing was, as I gave you the Sabbath day as a sign of the Mosaic covenant, I now give you the Sabbath year, every 7th year, as a sign of the Promised Land covenant. If you fail to let the land rest during the Sabbath years, the land will vomit you out and it will get its rest. And we see that happening centuries later in the Babylonian captivity, and the very words by Ezekiel, the land will receive its land. He talks about it having fulfilled. So this is, when you're talking about Abraham, it includes you because you've been grafted in to the people of Israel, Abraham's seed. Unless you're a Jew by blood, and then you had it already, but you had to be born again because God wanted Israel to become a new man. He promised all along, I'm going to give you a real heart after me. I'm going to give you a real mind. I'm going to pour out my Spirit on you. Israel, you're going to be changed. One time he says, I'm divorcing you, writing your certificate of divorce, you harlot. Turns right back around and said, oh, virgin Israel. Well, how can, it was against the law for a man to divorce his wife and remarry her. But that's not the case. He's going to divorce her, which brings about her death. And he's going to resurrect her as the new man, the new Israel. And then he's going to marry her. Well, when we found out that when he cut off some of the members of the house of Israel, when Yeshua came to earth, he cut off a bunch of them. Paul explains this in Romans 11 and Ephesians chapter 2. So he cut off the non-believing branches, but he continued to hold on to the faithful ones. They've always been his church. Israel's called the Kahal. That's the word church. So the remnant was saved. The bad guys were cut off. Then he opens the door to Louisiana. Can you imagine? Texas, New York, California, Alabama. Well, I don't know about that. You get what I'm saying? He opens up to the nations, and they come in. And he says, now when your fullness comes, your full number and your maturity, pleroma is the New Testament Greek word. It means fullness. Romans 11:25. When your fullness comes, then Kol Yisrael Yivasheach. All Israel will be saved. What is it that happens? In Romans 11:11 says God gave you the gospel, the Gentiles the gospel, to provoke them to jealousy, to goad them to jealousy. And then he says, if you write down a little further, And it's going to be like life from the dead when Israel is saved. So what causes the Gentiles? Just them coming in, the number? No, it's their maturing and embracing their Jewish roots so the Jews can look and go, you Gentiles have got my Messiah. And the Bible says they will have revival and be saved. And they will look up to the Messiah and say, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Yeshua said, when you say it, I'm coming. So, you're now part of these covenants, but you didn't get grafted into the law. When you came along, remember, only Israel had the law. When Israel, and then David came along, he received a covenant that his own offspring was going to be the Messiah, okay? The eternal ruler. So in the new covenant, he sets aside the old because he is the fulfillment of the old. Paul says it was not even based on faith. And look, without faith, you can't be saved. So the law was a figure or a shadow of the reality. So we can study the law and see the reality by shadow and type. When we get to the new covenant, though, we find the fulfillment. We find out that you don't have to wear a kippah, don't have to wear a talit, a prayer shawl. I don't even have to keep a Shabbat or a Pesach, Passover, etc. But these things were to teach me of the reality that Yeshua would do. Now, I can do those things, but I am not yoked or obligated. How is it? Obligated. I am not obligated to do so. Because why? Because that was a system to bring God's people to Him, to the Messiah. The purpose of the law, to lead them to Mashiach. For faith. It was about faith. So when they mature, they'll reach out and see Him as Messiah. A remnant did, huh? So when you're grafted in now, you're not grafted into the pedagogos, the babysitter, the schoolmaster, whatever term you want to use. You're not. You're grafted into the Israel of God, which is the eternal nation, which every member in it must be born again to form the new nation, and you must be full of faith, and the only way to get into this new existence for the kingdom that is set before you is by birth through Yeshua. He's the door. There is no way. And you can't go into Mashiach by faith and say, but I've got to keep this part of the law, because you try to get through the door and it won't pass through with you. Hebrews 7:11 says that the law was archaic. It couldn't meet the needs because what made it so powerful? What made it so faulty is that the people had sin natures. That law doesn't work when people are criminals. We could pass all the laws out here today against guns. It doesn't work when you have criminals. Law is for lawbreakers. The righteous don't need such restrictions. Right?
Oh, Yeshua.